You guys, we have two more chairs there and two more chairs here, and we have a single here. So come on in and sit down and relax. Let's speak up. Okay, hi, my name is Chris Freeman. This is my partner Matthew McNamara and myself, Kylie. These two people here are sitting here to talk together, and you're all invited to listen and engage later with questions. Just also like a sort of shout out, we do have catalogs that Kylie is signing, and they're for sale for $20 if anybody's wants a catalog after this whole thing. So here we have, thank you very much. So here we have Tom McGlynn. Tom is an artist and a writer and independent curator based in the New York City area. His work is represented in the permanent collections of the Whitney Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum of the Smithsonian. That was long. He is currently adjunct assistant professor at Parsons in the New School, and he's an often contributor to the Brooklyn Rail. They can't really survive without him. This is Kylie Heidenheimer. She's the artist that did this work, and she's sitting right here next to me. So Kylie Heidenheimer is an artist who alternates density and atmosphere across surfaces and depths in her abstract paintings. She has a BFA from Washington University in St. Louis and an MFA from CUNY Hunter College. Her work has been the subject of solo shows at Private Public Gallery, Thomas Jackal Gallery, in Ohio Northern University, the Italian Academy at Columbia University, and J.C. Flowers. Heidenheimer has been a visiting artist and has attended residencies at Blue Mountain Center, the Malay Colony, and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. She has also won the 2021 New York Studio School Mercedes Matter Award and 2020 Jason McGlynn Gallery Drawing Challenge. She has co-curated shows in New York City. She's written for 2 Coats of Paint and has been cited in the New York Times. She lives and works in New York and currently has produced a show exclusively for Private Public. She basically made all these last year while I was beating her to keep painting, and I didn't give her a show last year because I knew something amazing was going to happen in her. So she hated me, and she kept painting, and she made these. And I think they're amazing. So she's about to talk about her work live. She's right in front of you, and she's going to be with Tom McGlynn, who's still there. Thank you. I think you should pass this back and forth.
Sure.
Be kind of close, like about here.
Okay. Here, why don't you start?
Hang on a second so I can get over there.
There's your cheat sheet. Yes. Okay.
I'm good.
Thank you for that introduction. Just some background. I've known Kylie for probably about 25 years, and so I've been tracking her work and appreciating it for a long time now. And the occasion of this show is, I was really kind of blown away by this presentation because, frankly, I hadn't seen your work in a while, and I did have to do a studio visit for the catalog essay, which I also wrote. But there's something about this show where it's kind of a culmination of many, many years of really dedicated work as a painter. We both went to Hunter, not concurrently, but there is a tradition at that school of painting and color also. I just recently had a show which was titled This Here. And Kylie had mentioned that there was a coincidence of many different artists this fall who are using the term here, and we wanted to open up the discussion talking about what here might mean, since the coincidence of that word seems to be a singularity of sorts. So my perception of here with my title was that you have to literally be present in front of a painting to experience it, and to some extent a foil to experiencing paintings in any other way, or experiencing paintings in or anything in the virtual world, in that it's an embodied experience. But Kylie, you have a different.
Yeah.
Kylie's title is different because it's here elsewhere. So.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Yeah, with me, I see an interchangeability between, well, for here for me means the tangible parts of a painting, like the physical part, and the more ethereal part would be elsewhere or be alluding to elsewhere. And I see them as very interchangeable. I'm going to give the example of when I was a young artist, and I saw a Hopper painting, and I noticed how the sky, it was one of the Hopper's storefronts, and how the sky was literally holding down the storefront, the brick and mortar. And I think I noticed an interchangeability then, and that was the start of it. And then abstraction just seemed to be a way to interweave that kind of interchangeability. So.
Yeah, I think you mentioned about the sky being like a really heavy blue, and maybe that's not necessarily everybody's perception of a Hopper. I think it's a very painterly perception of a Hopper, a painter's kind of intuition as to what they're doing. And so you wouldn't necessarily think of a Hopper being off balance, but I think it is relevant. I think the concept of point, counterpoint, and the contrapuntal or the unexpected balance in painting is definitely something that Kylie's doing. I mean, instances of areas of the canvas where there's staining, and then other areas of the canvas where there's like a definitive kind of sometimes slashing type of mark, creates this contrapuntal movement. And so my interpretation of here elsewhere similar to that, but it's also here elsewhere is like this is happening here and then something else is happening there, which is probably what you were getting at as well. But it's just interesting, I think, to reposition the conversation about what a painting means, or how meaning can be reinvented specifically through the mode of painting. So, the colloquial here and elsewhere takes on different meaning when you're talking about composition in a painting. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about color. Like these, I use a lot of color in my own work, and I think about color a lot in terms of music and in terms of it's a very important art element, sometimes underused, but not in this instance. I think that from my point of view, you're juggling a lot here with your colors, which to me implies a lot of authority with that particular art element. And, since we both did go to Hunter and there was kind of a prevalent color school there, I was just wondering about like maybe the genesis of your work with color.
Well, I think of it, actually the color wheel a lot as an organizing principle. Like, in this painting, there's a lot of extremes in the color wheel. And let's say the brown painting or the blue painting over here, the colors are more analogous. And the analogousness can be a way to organize for me, for the painting to hold together. And perhaps, I have to think about it, but perhaps when the colors are more on the opposite ends of the color wheel. Maybe they have more tension. Um, so anyway, I would say that I think it's an organizing principle, in other words.
It is. It's actually an element of composition because, like you said, it has its own compositional, rationale, right? When I think of like a painting like this, and I think of any painting that has kind of like includes like all the colors in the spectrum or like a lot of colors, uh, you're balancing quite a bit, and I also think of that there's a conceptual dimension to color, which is kind of like it's global, like it's all inclusive, right? And so for me, color in that sense is also ambitious. It's not an ambition like scale, but it's an ambition to kind of like grasp the whole,
Yeah.
you know? And of course, that relates to composition in terms of where the colors are either revealed or concealed in your paintings, because you use, like I said, staining, but also the expressionist mark. And maybe we can talk about how the culmination of the colors happen, like with the mark making.
Well, the marks have to be toned down or brought up to get what I want. I'm particularly thinking of that one, which had gone through a lot of phases with that, with being too bright or not bright enough, for me to keep it at the point in space that I want them to stay. So, but the color and the mark, I mean, yeah, I think I'd have a hard time separating them, actually. So, I guess the value within the color and the size of the mark and the scale, they all relate. They all interrelate, I would say.
I remember looking at de Kooning's Door to the River and having this epiphany that the drips, it's very drippy painting, are actually indicators of scale. Not representational scale, but they're actually indicators of, they're not just residue of like the act. They're actually, if there's a drip that's this big and then there's it's like the Hans Hofmann painting, so that's interesting. But I also like thinking about abstract expressionism too. The expressionist mark has a history. And, it has a specific history within like the New York school. And I think it's interesting to differentiate at this point your work from that history or to contextualize it within that history. I mean, the famous quote or, construction by Rosenberg is that the artist is this dramatic actor in an arena, and that the gestures are, the residue of the act, or that it's a much more kind of literary reference than probably most painters would cotton to. I know that at the time, even his contemporaries weren't quite sure about that definition, but I do think it's kind of a definition of the expressive mark that we've inherited, almost as kind of a colloquialism. But when I encounter Kylie's work, I get the sense that, for one, she has that sense of a historical conscious because she's doing something different. Like you seem to be doing something different with the expressive mark.
Yeah, I almost feel like I'm not thinking about abstract expressionism at all. I'm thinking about like the pouring is a kind of pristine quality, and I for a while I was doing my work had almost no brush mark at all, and that comes from the first time I saw the Adirondacks and its pristine quality. It was like wow, and I ended up going to a residency at Blue Mountain Center, and it was pretty incredible. But then I sort of missed the mark and using the mark and the kind of affirming your existence through the mark, actually, I would say. And so then a dialogue developed between them later. But it's like yes, I pour, but I really do it as a hands-off method, not because I'm trying to, express things in an abstract, expressionist way.
It's interesting that you use the kind of inspiration of the Adirondacks, because I know that Bill in his review mentioned something related to landscape, and that made me think of Cézanne. It made me think of, one of the proto-modernists, and how Merleau-Ponty talked about Cézanne having a doubt as to whether his subject and then his interpolation of that subject actually held together. I mean, he didn't have doubt about picture making, but the premise of Merleau-Ponty is that it was a productive doubt, that the doubt was productive in the sense that he wasn't just dedicated to depicting reality, even though he felt it so intensely. Because he felt it so intensely, he invented this syntax for which to see through, almost like a second nature. And that's really how I see your work. I see your work as you're inventing this syntax. And for me, in my particular interest, I appreciate painting that is thinking about painting. And I think that's different than art for art's sake.
Oh, yeah.
I think, just to clarify, I think when I get a sense that an artist or a painter is thinking about painting, there's a certain kind of objectivity, And I know that you've talked in the past about your process of like covering the canvas. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, actually, I'm always kind of thinking of ways to make it across the canvas. And that's a lot what's going on with this dialogue with pouring and Mark is how to go from one end to the other, how to justify it while keeping the kind of tensions I want.
Yeah, and I love that kind of boilerplate studio language of like, I have to get from one side of the canvas to the other. And everybody's laughing because you know what that means, right?
Yeah.
And there's a kind of humility to that, right? You're subject to the process, right? You have to make it across the canvas and then come to some sort of conclusion, right? And then there's always a question as to when it's finished, right? I think with abstraction, the question of when it's finished might be more applied, because it's not like a resolved picture per se. But we can also talk about the intentionality of irresolution, right? That some abstract painters, I shouldn't generalize, that irresolution is a goal. We talked a little bit about that. I think it might be related to here elsewhere too. Do you think that way?
Well, the whole thing about doubt and uncertainty, I mean, the kind of marks I'm making, they're not like full off. Sometimes they're like full arc marks where like the wrist is really loose, but sometimes they're not. And I think that does tie in with that whole thing about doubt. And what was the other word that was connected with doubt that we were using that you mentioned? Irresolution or, yeah. I mean, it's the opposite of the certainty of like classic abstract expressionism. So I'm very interested in the openness of and that sense that you've observed, is something coming together, falling apart. There's no answer. I'm trying to, in a way, I'm focusing on a force field that's in between those.
Yeah, you just made me think of that Frank Stella comment about what bothered him about the abstract expressionism is they didn't know what to do in the corners. And when you think about it, like what could be more like doctrinaire than trying to figure out what to do in the corners, right?
Yeah.
But that is it's another way of navigating across the canvas. Like, maybe his determination was you have to navigate reasonably across the whole canvas, you know. But I don't think, I would go back to the idea that the expressionist mark is not unreason. It's not pure emotion, you know. It's not that it doesn't have an emotional resonance when we feel it. I mean, we feel the spontaneity, and you've mentioned chance as being a really important part of your work.
Yeah. As in taking a chance. I mean, we all do in going from one part of the canvas to the other. But often, what I'm doing is that, like when I'm doing a pour or fling, of course, I don't know what it's going to look like. And then I have to respond to that. And it's sort of maybe honoring the chance of having done the first thing. So.
And Bill, do you remember what the phrase was that you used in your review about rejoinder? Do you remember that sentence?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I
you have that
I do.
somewhere? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. No, do you think it was great? Yeah. No, you said that I sought out the least possible, least obvious rejoinder. Like, yeah, and that actually is that kind of pointing to that I'm referring to. Like, if there's this weird shape that I want acknowledged, I have to create something next to it that will acknowledge it, and it's probably not. Sometimes it's a repetition of something similar, but sometimes it isn't. So.
Yeah, so that idea of the unexpected or the least predictable enjoyer, it made me think of, like you're at a cocktail party and someone enters the conversation and they say something that's out of left field, but that's the person who you focus on because it's just, all of a sudden you become present, because of that contradiction. It's an apparent contradiction, but it kind of like opens up a field, right? It opens up a field. And in talking about abstraction, like in the larger sense, that's what abstraction can do. It can open up a different field of perception where the terms are changed by that least potentially predictable enjoinder. I thought that was a beautiful turn of phrase. Often, when we talk about abstraction, the conversation tends to boil it down in a representation, using representational language, and so it doesn't do anybody any good. But by the same token, I mean, it is difficult to talk about something coming out of left field without being in the center of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
So speaking about composition, I mean, composition is very important to my work, and I think I read something a while ago about Ruskin, the 19th century critic, and he said that composition was the central determining point for like excellence. And I thought it was interesting. There's talking about a formal thing, right? So he was applying this criteria to different, 14th century and 15th century Italian artists, and saying the ones that had the ones that paid attention to the dynamism of the composition were the ones that he felt reached a plane of excellence. That in his, determination, his Brahmin determination was, the thing to get at. And I think when I look at these paintings, there is this, and we've talked about a little bit, this ostensible cathartic mark, but it's really contradicted by how they all hold together. So when you're in the zone, right, you're making the painting. And this again might be the most predictable rejoinder, but like when you're working on a composition, like how does that work?
Let's see. Oh
You can
boy.
answer in general terms.
Okay, yeah. I'm thinking in terms of layers interacting a lot, and and also scale. I'm not interested in an overall painting, even though I've got to get across the canvas. So yeah, does that answer that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
And I was going to ask you about the verticality of the paintings too,
yeah.
because that to me relates to the body as well. I mean, it's not a portrait. It's a full length portrait. You know, not to bring representational language in here, but
Yeah.
oops. But when you said that you're not necessarily thinking about getting across the canvas when you're working, it made me immediately think about the location of your body in relation to, and I think the marks also imply that. Like I'm looking at this painting here, and the blue marks indicate kind of a proximity to me. It's more intimate, like there's kind of an intimate expression there as opposed to some of the other expressions, which seem to be more supporting cast or something like that. And it's not as if the work has, you know, like a major player, because the distribution is pretty well done, you know. But there are parts in the canvas where it looks like you're closer and you're working in a more, you know, if it's just like a conglomeration of gestures within one section, it's kind of like, you know, when you're waiting for a bus and you see all the gum on the ground on the sidewalk, you know. It's like it's an indicator of like there's a bunch of people were waiting for the bus right there. You
Yeah.
know.
Right.
So in my essay for the my catalog essay, I mentioned that you had a labial relationship to composition, by which I meant it's a very loose relationship to composition. So, I mean, is that it's probably not something you think about. I'm not sure because, like, if you thought about it, then it wouldn't be good abstraction, right? It's like,
Yeah.
but maybe I'm talking about like an athletic thing.
Huh.
You know, like I've talked to other painters about this. Like it's actually it's a physical act
Yeah.
that you're doing. You're coming back and forth with the painting, and
Yeah.
you know. So maybe you could just discuss the
Right.
studio practice a little
A
bit.
little bit. Well, again, I think I'm definitely thinking of composition, but I'm thinking of interacting layers. So, you know, but at the same time, you know, and then the sizes of marks in terms of scale as ways of holding it all together. And in terms of my studio practice, I work on often a lot of things at once. I sometimes feel a bit like an auctioneer or something like, do I need blue over here? Need blue over here? You know, blah, 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 blah. It sort of becomes a bit like that. I feel like I'm pawning it off or something. So,
That's great.
yeah.
So would you say that's a relational? Thinking about color, going back to color, some of these paintings strike me differently as emotionally as in terms of a mood. I mean, I think one of the best, most interesting, and sometimes most elusive aspects of color is the emotional
Yeah.
impact. So when you think about, like, say, like that large diptych, as opposed to this much more undersaturated orange, red composition, it's more assimilative, like you mentioned. The difference between an expanded palette and an assimilative palette. Do they evoke mood for you?
Are they evoking? Maybe I would say maybe memory more than mood. Especially like the blue one. I keep thinking of like shrubbery, the ins and outs of shrubbery, And the verticality definitely has, it's like, I think that is like kind of an imprimatur for me growing up, spending my first years in North Florida and all the hanging Spanish moss there and the light coming through it. So I think memory and longing play a big role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do think, since I also work with color a lot, I do think that you can kind of get away with nostalgia and memory in an abstract painting when you're dealing with color,
Yeah.
because ostensibly it's open to everyone,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's the promise of abstraction, that the viewer completes the sentence, right? Or comes up with their own sentence. But I have noticed that when people relate to color, often it's an emotional response,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And these are very adept in terms of color. I mean, I can say, that like a painting like this feels very blaring, like, like a blaring statement,
Mm-hmm.
which I approach as a viewer actively, whereas a painting next to it, like the blue one and the brown one in the back, they're more enveloping in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like environment,
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that abstraction can do. It's like it can approximate the envelopment of like a landscape or just a mood,
Mm-hmm.
mood indigo, right? It's
Yeah.
like the assimilative can be you're falling in love, but it can also be you're incredibly depressed,
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think, when I look around the room, there's such a complexity. There's such a complexity of expression here, and it has to do with both with your facility with color and the willingness for you to take chances in the composition and still kind of pull it off. When I originally saw this painting in the studio, I actually didn't know what to think, and that's a good thing,
Yeah.
To some extent, like it reminded me of more of like chance, like more of stains that you might find like, on the wall or on a dumpster or something like that. It seemed very gritty and urban, you know. Um, but when you look at a painting like that, it's much more, this one over here, it's much more lyrical. It's much more
Yeah.
how, someone like Guston
Right.
would orchestrate color,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, so, I think that you've been very generous to the viewer in terms of leaving things open, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, there's a very determined style, but the pleasure of seeing your work is to be kind of comfortable or accommodated, feeling accommodated by like the authority of the compositional
Mm-hmm.
skill. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like your authoritativeness is overweening or, trying to stop time or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, that's true. I mean, authority probably means different things in different circumstances. And when you're talking about abstraction or the riffing of jazz, which you mentioned in the review, um, it's kind of like it's knowledge that's almost disassociated with its classical origin. Like a jazz musician knows scales back and forth, but those are the same scales a classical musician uses, but they're using it in a very different way, and they're sort of reinventing And maybe I would say that that's probably what abstraction does. You have more of a license to reinvent and go to places that you can't in other more classical ways of working. And so the authority, the authority is there. It's just disassociated from its history, from its deep history, and being applied in different ways.
Yeah, I think you're talking about two different kinds of authority. Like there's a kind of like the historical record,
Yeah.
which like in the 60s, a lot of artists stopped painting because they felt the weight of that historical record and they moved into video and performance because they felt like painting with a capital P had too much baggage, right? And it's interesting to think about painting didn't die, right? And what it means like in the contemporary sense. Like what is if we're comparing like authorities, right? What's the authority of the current moment? I mean, obviously it's lack of authority, but what's maybe the cultural zeitgeist I don't even know if it's possible to kind of try to pin that down. But getting back to here-ness, I do think I do think about that as maybe that living in the virtual world has kind of reinvented the experience or made much more valuable the experience of like feeling something and being present with something, and that's what painting can do, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what painting can uniquely do. The last thing I wanted to talk about is you did talk about like dichotomy. I talked about paradox and how it's important for artists to kind of lean into paradox because it's also contrapuntal. If you keep the conversation suspended, right? The least potential rejoinder.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you meant about dichotomy?
And suspended was the word I was thinking of, that I was looking for before. I don't see it. I see it as trying to create tension more than dichotomy, or that least possible rejoinder thing of really just to say, look at what's over there. Don't look at me. Look at what's over there. It's kind of there's a lot of deflection going on. Yeah, and maybe these marks are, in their funny way, they're self-conscious. They want you to, they don't want you staring at them too hard. They want you to look at what's next to them.
I think that's an amazing statement because it's the pathetic fallacy of painting, right?
Yeah.
That we're dealing with an object that was created, but we're asking sentience of it. Right, we're asking kind of like a
whole lot.
Yeah, there's like a lively projection, right? I mean so we might want to end it there. Is that okay?
Yeah, and if there's questions.
Oh, well, yeah, we're going to take
we'll do questions. Yeah. Yeah. And we're certainly good. We were going to do questions. Yes.
Do we have to pass this around?
I don't know.
Is it long?
Does it make sense to pass?
You guys ended about 15 minutes short,
Oh.
Okay.
or 10 minutes short.
Okay.
So we have good time for questions.
Good.
Okay.
A lot of painters here. So.
Okay. I guess people, is it best that people shout out because this cord is not, not wireless.
Yeah, it's not a wireless. So.
Yeah.
All right, I'll shout something out.
Okay.
Early on, my name is Buzz Spector. I sometimes write about painting myself, and as Kylie well knows, I've taught it for 30 years without ever showing a painting I made. You said early on, Tom, that Harold Rosenberg talked about action painting as something painters don't cotton to. And then you claim for yourself, I appreciate painting that is thinking about painting rather than art for art's sake. And this followed right after something that really registered deeply for me. the way Kylie indicated this painting, the orange painting, that painting, the brown painting, the other painting, the blue painting. And naming colors is the register of the difference between experience and perception. There is no good purpose to be served by attempting to describe accurately the colors of a word, because you go on to volume 2 before you're done with the spectrum. So we have a kind of trust we exercise in language.
Yeah.
That what you painted and the color orange, we trust are in some kind of dialogue. But it is not a dialogue between words, it's a dialogue between language and apparition. And so for you to talk at the end about how the gestures don't want you looking at them too long, I thought was as brilliant a summary of the affect in your art as anything I've heard today. That some paintings are all about gesture, including people Rosenberg was writing about
Right.
in 1951.
Right.
That's a long preamble for a short question. Must a picture be finished to be resolved?
That's a very good question. Does it? Does it have to be finished? Resolution can mean a lot of things. Finish can mean a lot of things. So I'm after a certain tension and impact before I consider something finished. Any other questions?
I had a question that kind of relates to what you were saying about language and titles, and you talked about nature, you talked about a northern nature, a southern landscape influencing you, you talked about being in the zone. And one thing I'm really interested in this period that I don't see a distinction between abstraction and
Yeah.
personally, I Liz said that in 81. But could you talk a little bit about what that zone is like in your mind as you're creating these spaces, realities? That you mentioned being in a zone, but I'm just so curious what that is for artists.
Uh-huh.
Do you have, you talk about the verticality and the feeling of the trees or whatever, and then you talk about the more abstract thing, but can you, or is it too hard to verbalize, or, what that zone is when you're in the zone and creating these unique spaces?
I mean, I think it can be pretty pedestrian, like I'm trying to get across the canvas. It doesn't mean that I'm not inspired by, for sure I'm inspired by, mass. I agree with you, like figurative and abstraction, they're kind of dumb distinctions. But, sometimes I'm just trying to do that, and then the inspiration for the painting is something else. That's sort of in the back. Like this one, I'll say, and I told Bill this at the time. I was in Copenhagen 2 years ago, and it was the Tivoli Gardens. I don't know how many people have seen them, but they're really you know them well. They're really remarkable. They're like landscape and rides that are just beautifully done. They're the inspiration for Disney. And then like the Brown painting is like a lifelong love with Rembrandt, and I was just in Australia and saw a lot of Aboriginal work. But
when you're working, are you in a nonverbal?
Am I in a nonverbal? Yeah, I would say so. Except
it's so interesting that you or other artists can, I'm hearing all this theory from the two guys, but it's like artists, can we get into a nonverbal place, and is that really where creativity comes from? I'm curious.
yeah, I would say very much. If anything, the verbal is the hard part. Yeah. So that makes me wonder about you and your paintings too, actually.
When it's nonverbal, it's when it really works.
Yeah, yeah. So, Jean?
I'm still not a question, but standing here, I'm just looking at the painting. Well, I had a very good visit when you were in Tennessee for sure, but to me, it's more than just getting a person. I feel as though you find an event in the work,
Yeah.
and then everything sort of, supports that event in some way. And that the events are very varied.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that strikes me is that, especially with this strange vertical yellow painting here, yellow and black, that there's a certain amount of surprise and delight when you discover something and you and you're open to it. And I feel like you let it speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, definitely. Like supporting an event, supporting why the first thing was done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or finding that event and then
yeah,
everything supports it.
right.
I like the term event because she's discovering multiple events, and
From painting or with.
no, within each painting, yeah. And the point I think of that is to hear elsewhere. I mean, because if an event becomes a focal point, it tends to be a vortex which kind of organizes all the other gestures. And she's not doing that. And I think that's a singular achievement of this work, is that it's distributing the events.
Mm-hmm. Mary?
Yeah, Kylie. No, I'm curious if you start with one color and move across with one color and then go in with multiple layers with the other colors, or if they kind of interplay throughout the whole process.
Yeah.
And then I have one other question
sure.
about this one. There are a lot of pencil lines in there. And I'm wondering if you put those down first, if you kind of had a sense of a structure or a perspective with this one.
Yeah. The pencil is to me like an extension of the, no, I rarely put the pencil down first. It's more like an extension of the paintbrush for me. It's like the number one paintbrush. Yeah, as opposed to the number 4 or something like that. And can you repeat your first, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just wondering if you start with one color and distribute marks with one color of paint, or if you're constantly changing that and then moving across.
Often it is one. It's that auctioneer thing of where
That's
can
what I
this go?
said.
Yeah, yeah, right. So, yeah, and then I kind of wear it out, and then I go to the next, or which can be an analogous decision or an extreme opposite decision. So, yeah. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Kylie. Beautiful show.
Thank you.
Thanks. Can you say something about the unpainted parts of most of these paintings? Have pretty large, significant areas, not or where no paint is. I don't want to say empty, because I don't read it as empty. But what this one here, this one looks like the only one that it's got a painted surface. So what? Can you say something about that? Why you choose to stop when you stop, or what that white is doing for you while you're putting the marks on?
Well, I don't want to fill it, and if I do that, I think I'll kill the whole painting. So it'll just, a lot of charge will leave it. I'd say that's my answer.
I do notice that in the paintings that on the bottom where it's unfinished, there's a sense of buoyancy.
Mm-hmm.
There is a phenomenological feel of buoyancy, which is...
Yeah. Also, Peter, I think I have a little bit more to say to your question, and that I sometimes don't know the distinction anymore between painting and drawing. And so, these are as much drawings as there are paintings, and, with drawings, that's not always asked of drawings, that you fill every
Yeah.
corner.
Yeah, I mean, my impression
That's a great
was the
point.
word sketch came to mind, which I use very in a complimentary meaning.
Yeah.
That often in my own work, like if I do a sketch or I leave a painting at a point when it's more of a sketch, it's got life, it's got some uncertainty, it's got some various directions built in. But if I feel I need to work on it, it's always a very hard struggle to keep it from closing
Yes.
down to kind of, claustrophobia or something.
Right. Which is why drawings often feel more intimate to us.
But also, a
Right.
second follow-up question, were these 4 paintings painted in the city or upstate?
This was, even though this was most recently in the city, it was painted up here. This was entirely painted in the city. A lot of these were up here, partly because I haven't had full access to my actual studio in the city.
Okay. The reason I asked is that they appear to me, the image was to be cityscapes. Really very metaphoric,
Yeah, that one
very
definitely. Yeah.
beautiful buildings and streets at night and the depth of the, an avenue, that kind of perspectival city space. And that brown one, I mean, the middle of it, I mean, just like, if I saw that, as marks on a wall, like accidental marks, I would be like amazed, like that is just a beautiful cityscape. So are you playing with that at all or no?
That is the whole getting across the canvas thing.
Yeah.
I think actually, if anything, I think more of nature. But I get it. You do right angles, people are going to see architecture.
Yeah.
That's I accept that. Yeah. So I'm almost never actually thinking of urban,
Yeah.
actually.
You have a question?
Hi, Holly.
Hi, show looks absolutely incredible. It's great to sit here for a long moment. One thing I wanted to bring up was whether you think about the word, I see the suspension inside of a structure produced with a very amazingly light touch. Because oftentimes structure and lightness of touch don't go together. And I also think a lot about the diagrammatic
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and how it can speak to things that are not readily available visually, as we've read about in some fabulous essays in our lives. But I think about structure and diagram more than I think about composition.
mm-hmm.
And I think that those two things are where the crossover between urban and what might be natural form can happen and play, between those things.
Yeah. Sometimes I think I do the structure last in a funny way. Like I'm inverted. I have like a group of my paintings on my website I call reverse paintings for that reason. So yeah, no, that's a good point about structure.
You find it as you go.
Well, I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, this needs some structure. So I give it to it, but I do it last. I do it, it's the opposite of the armature and then the rest. So.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
One reason why I went back to Kylie's studio after the first time I saw her work was that they felt very diplomatic and constantly worried about the next mark, making sure everything's okay. So if you're in her studio and you see her chair and her painting, the floor is worn out because none of these lines are aligned. They're all like made up of 20 different moments of, is this enough? Are you okay? That kind of interior dialogue seemed to happen for me. So, and like the brown painting wasn't, between the two of us, it wasn't finished. So when we delivered all the paintings here, she spent a few days working on that after a conversation about some other experiences she had in Australia. And, she was just left alone. And it was amazing to watch her process. So there's like a very heavy neuroses in these. when she, like in this one here, when she actually finally gets to smearing, you know, a lot has to be okay. That's just what I wanted to say.
I would ascribe that to pathos.
Say that again?
Pathos, that's pathos of a painting, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm doing good. Yeah, Suzanne's got her hand raised.
Chris, I'm glad you mentioned the scraping, because so far, every time you talk about the color, I keep thinking about the density of the mark. And that there's stains and there are things that are touched and things that are pounded and are almost puffball, that one thing right next
Yeah.
to your head. And that the difference in the textures or the application of the paint, you used, I know we're not trying to use the word figurative, but you did start with the word embodied experience. And one of the things about looking is that we're looking at the body making it. And so that feels as much a part of it to me as anything else. How do you feel about it?
Are you saying that it's like you're seeing a reflection of the body in the work?
No, I'm saying that the body makes a mark. A body stains something. A body makes a lot of your hand marks that come on top that are, I can really see the brush. But sometimes there's no sense of a brush. There are these puffs of stains.
Yeah, I know.
Or that dribble, exciting thing that's like the aftermath of fireworks. And we tend to think associatively, which is why those nouns come up.
Yeah.
But when you were doing it, you weren't saying, oh yeah, fireworks. You were just like,
No.
what's happening?
Right.
Across that surface.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would say, yeah, bodily in the sense of pressures and sometimes like, there's real taut marks. That's a word Bill used in the essay and you've used it in yours too. But other times there's the loose wrist. So yeah, I would say those are all bodily decisions, and it's a form of a polyglot universe of language. I'm not interested in promoting one language at all. Yeah, because that's part of how you get across a canvas is having having a polyglot.
When you mentioned the getting across the canvas, I know I'm hobby, but I kept thinking, and there's a fire hydrant over here, and someone dropped a bunch of marbles, and now we still have to get across.
Yeah, and not get overly distracted. Yeah,
Not trip.
yeah, yeah.
Ivan, did you say at one point that you're not trying to make a painting? And I thought that was really interesting. I'm not trying to make a painting. I thought that might be a really good strategy for evading the whole tradition of painting. But I wondered if not.
Yeah.
Did I hear you right?
Well, losing the preconception of what a painting is, I would say, is more, and that you touched on that too. Yeah, of like the painterly certainty. Yeah. So, yeah, and just because it helps with the next move if you lose that preconception.
Right.
For one thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're trying to do something in a painting happens to be the best way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean why I'm painting in the first place? Is that?
You're obviously in deep. So.
Right. Yeah. 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 But no, it stays within painting. I'm not trying to. I mean, okay, well, this goes back to like someone like Cezanne. The more I look at him and the more I fall in love with him, I just saw this not too long ago, this incredible show. It was first in Chicago and then it was at the Tate, and it was this huge history of his work. I'm beginning to see him more as like a builder than a painter. So, maybe, but it's still painting. It's still, yeah. It's both and, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking when you said layering, Cezanne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi.
Would you consider the metaphor of dance to describe the relationship you have with various kinds of marks and your hand and how you travel through your surface as a reflection of a kind of documentation of what what's going on in your body and your head coming together in that dancerly relationship?
I think increasingly, yes. Yeah. With the whole, loose wrist versus, taut wrist and things like that. Yeah. Does anybody? Chris, are you seeing any questions in the?
I just saw a question.
There we go. Oops.
My bike fell apart.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just had my ankle replaced. Ankles are different. I had my knee replaced and it was hard. Ankles are really weird and the pain changes all the time. And I'm trying to feel like I can walk on it, but I'm not allowed to put any pressure on it. So, just wanted to let you know. The other thing is, with the heat, I'm trying to balance it between like we're freezing and we can actually hear people talking. So I'm really sorry about that. Here's a question from Kathy Goodell.
Oh yeah.
So the untreated areas are like the oxygen necessary to ignite the flame.
I think I'm thinking about that the whole time, Kathy. Yeah, I would say, so not necessarily the untreated areas more than the other areas. But yeah, absolutely oxygen and flames.
I have another question.
Yeah.
This is from Chancey Brackett. What does moving across the painting feel like to you? Climbing through a tree? Moving through a crowded room?
Hi, Jason.
Whoops.
Let's see. That's a great question. I think again, similar to Kathy's question, like trying to keep things breathing, and so I want intervals to not be too close yet not so far that they're doing nothing. So yeah, but crowded. Yeah, I mean, I don't like it when things get too crowded, or they can be crowded in places, but not everywhere.
Is that it?
Is that it?
That's all I can find.
That's it. Thank you.